Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where today's most exciting startup founders share their stories and strategies. They also deliver tangible lessons learned along the way that you can apply to your own startup. Each episode is a true masterclass. Make sure you take notes. Take it away, Kevin.
This is Kevin Pruitt with an Encore presentation of Rising Tide Startups, and one of my favorite guests has donned the mic again, Kenny Kline. Kenny, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide Encore.
Oh, great to be back. A real honor to be back.
Hey man, it's good to that we kind of jumped a couple of scheduling hoops and kind of made this happen again. But Kenny, for those that don't know you, please share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I generally work now in, you call it niche media. So I create, manage, run sites that are focused on passionate audiences. So I had a number of these sites that I've created over the years and sold most of them in 2020, shortly after the pandemic started. Not related, but kind of been planning that sale for a while. And then and since took a little bit of time off, slowed down, and I'm back in the game a little bit in a bit of a different role, but similar area for a site called Barbend. And we just acquired another one called Breaking Muscle, which is focused on strength sports. So we're a team of 15 strong now, just all content producers essentially, targeting that really intense weightlifter. I always say I go to the gym about 3 times a week, and I can't read Barbend because it's too intense for me. That's the level of kind of like, weightlifting specimen that we're looking for on the site. And so that's been the journey thus far. Now currently based in Nashville, previously in Brooklyn. So adjusting that whole new media scene as well.
Well, I think about the time we talked on the first episode, I think you were either making the transition or had just made it. I can't remember if that was the case, but actually, I think you were still in Brooklyn when we talked the first time.
Yeah,
but,
I think we were Brooklyn that one. Yeah.
It is, he mentioned off camera, he's about to be dad for a second time. And so life's about to change around the Klein household. But
yes,
man, it is so good to have you back on. But let's lay a little bit of a foundation for new listeners. So when you talk about niche media, when you talk about, these are really focused websites, and they were, you say, okay, I want to talk about, cheeseburgers. Everybody that loves cheeseburgers, that's who we're going to target. People that just love that over everything else, and we're going to just really make a site that is just kind of an information site and just build a community around that. So what were some of the early, I guess, niche sites that you really focused on, or niche areas that you focused on maybe that really just took off?
Yeah, well, and I won't mention the ones that didn't, because there were a number when I didn't know what I was doing, it just kind of went by the wayside. But the first smaller, where I really got my feet wet. So we're talking, give you a sense of numbers, maybe tens of thousands of visitors a month, maybe a couple $1,000 in revenue. First one was called, I love telling this one, it's called Rash Resource. It was a site all about rashes. That you're having one, let me try to help you out. This was in 2012, I think I launched that site, and it was a quick up, and then it kind of forgot about it, moved on. And I had another one that was about world population statistics. So just like, if you're looking for the info on a given city, this and that, demographics, all that, I had kind of everything sitting there for you. So those are my first early, like small fries sites, but kind of got my feet wet, learned a lot as I was developing it. And then my first, site of scale was when I launched a mattress review site, which we launched in 2014. My partner and I, right before Casper launched their company, which Casper kind of put mattresses on the map in a very big way. I'm sure your listeners are,
especially the online retailer space, for sure.
Exactly. So we had a mattress review site, and and that did great, and that's kind of our first one. Within that, acquired a couple other mattress review sites. Started Barbend, a weightlifting site. Started a home security site, and I've got a few more in the works now that I'm thinking about. And so it's actually the best time, I think, to launch a site like this, and the worst time. There's a lot of competition. So if you've got your eye on, credit card recommendations, like you're going up against, literally $1 billion companies that are very skilled at executing this type of business model. But if you're looking to blog in an area of interest, or to create content in an area of interest, there's so much opportunity. There's so many tools that make it so easy. The ad networks are really picking up their game, so it's a little easier to monetize than it used to be. And I think there's a lot more info out there on how to do it. So how to create a blog, how to find ideas on what to blog about, what information to look at. And so it's an exciting time, I think, not to mention all the other, media platforms there are.
Right.
Like, you don't have to do it.
That was my question when you mentioned that, because, and I'm a geezer. I am an old man. But when you use the word blog, that's like, 2005 called and wants their web presence back.
Exactly.
So, I mean, compared to the prevalent social media, TikTok, Instagram, those outlets, how does it compete? How do blogs compete in today's market, especially with the Gen Z, younger demographic?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I mean, compared to the average TikToker, I think I'm an old geezer also. So, there's not one right or wrong way to do it if you're doing it. But I think the skill of blogging is you're usually utilizing Google as your primary traffic source, which is just a massive, predictable traffic source at this point. And so it's nice in that way, where if you put in the work, you're going to have and you do it in the right way, you're going to have a level of success. Does that, are you going to hit certain projections exactly, or this or that? Like, it depends on how long you do it. But I think a lot of people have had success in it, and are building up. It has a great base. And the people that do it really right, I think, use that as a foundation, or use one of these other channels as a foundation, and then expand to all of them. So it's really, what are you really good at? Where can you make your mark quick? And then, even if you're on TikTok, again, I'm not a TikTok expert by any means, but just being a TikToker doesn't translate into revenue. And TikTok's pretty young, but as we've seen historically, every platform changes in terms of its reach, in terms of how your content gets shown. And so I would say, if you're on TikTok and you've got an audience, that's awesome, you're doing it right. But can you get those people on an email list too? Or can you transition that? Can you also write some articles and start doing the blog thing? It's really about taking your core expertise and leveraging it into being more predictable thing, and creating a flywheel of content, where if you have an email list, then you promote your TikToks, or you promote your blog, or whatever, and it cycles through, and it just grows it even faster. And again, like, I think back in the day, to do all these things was so tough, because nobody knew anything about anything, and we're just all making it up. Back in the days, like 2014, not that long ago, but now it's like, creating blogs easy. Like creating, TikTok, I just haven't spent the time, but I could figure it out pretty quickly. And it's pretty relatively easy to make those videos, right? We all have phones, we're walking around with the quality's pretty good, the editor's in there, right? So YouTube's another great channel that I'm a big fan of. And so compared to creating a video in 2010 versus creating a video now is a remarkable difference. So I think it's easy, again, harder because you have more competition out there, but if you're consistent and really keep executing on your plan, over time, like, a lot of people have had great success on all the platforms, I think.
Right. That's such a great explanation. And especially, when you were talking about, if you just have an audience, that's not enough, and you have to monetize that audience somehow. You have to figure that out. I mean, I told you off camera that my daughter is trying to be a kind of a TikTok influencer, and she may have a following of 400,000 people, but at the stage she's at, translating that into dollar bills, Joe, is hard. It is difficult, because that may be a 400,000 disparate people audience. They're not 400,000 that love country music, or whatever that particular
Right.
thing is. But without diverging or divulging any of the secret sauce or IP, of your companies, but when you look at sites, what are you looking for? Like when you say, hey, we want to launch a site, that's going to be in a specific area. I mean, the things that come to mind are, like keyword search and that competition and ad costs and stuff like that. But there's probably more to it than that but I mean, I also think that, looking at your list of sites, you're thinking, you don't have to be passionate about this. You're not passionate about rashes. You're not,
Right.
You weren't passionate about mattresses,
Right.
this was just, the things fit the kind of that your own formula, that you had created. But
Right.
what are you looking for?
I think that those are pretty clear cut, but can you draw a circle around a group of readers or people and put them together in a content area? So barbend, weightlifting is one, but it's actually a couple of different physical sports that we cover. And so in my mind, it's like, all right, what's the topic, and what are you really looking to provide to a specific group of people? Like, you've got a plant behind you, right? In the shot. And, that is such a wide, broad world by itself, even, right? Like plants. Okay. Are they house plants? Are you vegetable gardening? Are you keeping chickens in the backyard? Are you a landscape developer that wants to create a business, right? Like all of these different categories, right? How do you draw a circle around a certain type of people and speak to them directly? And the more directly you speak to your reader, the more success you're going to have.
Mm-hmm.
Second to that, it is keyword research, but there's always endless things to write about in any niche. So it's not a question of if, it's a question of competition. And so, like I mentioned, credit cards, and there's a number of other niches where it's really, really competitive. There are a number of other niches where, particularly if you're interested in it, it's not that competitive, relatively. And that doesn't mean you're going to have instant success.
Right.
But it does mean if you keep at it and, after a period of time, you will have, some measure of success typically. And so it's all about scale too. What the size, this is excluding the rash site, but it's kind of like, what are your goals long term if you want to think about this? It's like, it's serious relationship starting a website if you're going to keep at it.
Yeah.
My sites I've all run for minimum of 5 years before I sold them, and I could have sold them earlier, but typically you get more and more rewards.
Right. The value would have been less. Yeah.
Yeah, as you keep them. And so it's really about, can you what are you trying to achieve over the period of time that you're trying to accumulate? And so to me, with my big company I was after, I was like, I want every site to be able to make $1 million a month. Like that was, and can I draw a big enough circle or the right circle so that that's the case? And I didn't.
Pretty lofty goal.
Yeah. And I wasn't saying, hey, next month. I was saying, in 10 years or whatever. And I didn't know. I was just kind of like, that seems like it's like a pretty big goal. And I didn't make it, but I got with my last company a fair bit of the way there. And with Barbend, we're a fair bit of the way there. So even if you fall short, you're still in a pretty nice range, right?
It sounds like that Disney quote that says, aim for the moon, and if you miss, you fall among the stars, or something.
Yeah,
like
exactly. Which astronomically makes no sense, but it is the quote. Yeah.
Hey, but Jiminy Cricket said it, or somebody.
Yeah. No,
I read it on the internet.
Yeah, it's definitely. Yeah, people say it's definitely true, and I believe, like, hey, if if you're aiming for $1 million a month and you only get to 600,000, I don't feel that.
Poor Kenny.
Yeah. So, but that doesn't have to be anyone's goal. A lot of people's, like my first goal when I started my very first site, I was like, I want to make $10,000 a month, so that I like never have to get a job. Like, and that was, I think that's a lot of people's first goal, or 5,000 a month or whatever, right? And I think that's why blogging is really cool, is because a lot of people have achieved that in blogging in the most random, niches. I was listening to a podcast the other day that had done this in plants, and he just had a like I don't know plants very well. Some subset of house plants was his thing, and he was making $10,000 a month, and he was obsessed with whatever this subplot of plants was. And so, how awesome is that? He quit his job. He was a 40, 50-year-old guy, whatever he was, and achieved that outcome. And now he just stays home and writes about plants, and maybe another year or two he's making 20,000 a month, like way more than he was making at his job. So it's a lot of work. It's not to say you don't have a job anymore, but I think it's pretty exciting that opportunity exists in the world. It didn't exist 20 years ago. And so
there's no doubt about that. No doubt about it. You mentioned acquiring sites, like smaller sites, to kind of maybe aggregate into your larger sites. So is that normally just like a multiple of ad revenue? Is it based on their email list? And do you automatically assume that when you absorb a smaller site into your larger site that you're going to lose 30%? Or, is there going to be a loss there, out the back door type thing?
Sure. Well, yeah, there's always different levels of acquisition, right? So it's cool. There's a lot of platforms like Empire Flippers or Flippa or a number of others, Microacquire, more SaaS stuff, but a lot of good platforms where you can look at what's available. Most commonly, when I buy, it's a multiple of profit.
Yeah.
And so not always the case, but I have bought a site that was really not profitable. So it's like, you can't do that, right?
Right.
So what other factors does it have it going for it? What's the growth rate? Does it have an email list? What's the size of the market? What's the state of the company? All these things are kind of measures of it. But what's interesting too, and what we've taken advantage of, and people that bought me took advantage of, is the bigger you are, the higher the multiple. So say your site's making 100 grand a year, probably a common multiple would like be 3 or 4. So you would sell for $300,000 or $400,000, which is great. If your site is maybe in the $3-4 million profit range, it might sell for 6 times profit or 8 times profit. So it's not $20 to $30 million. And then if you're at like 8, 9, 10 million in profit, it'll sell for 10 times plus. Again, all the other factors measure in, but so what's interesting is, to your question, when I buy a site, I always assume things are going to go bad, just because it's a safe assumption. I expect things will go better, of course, in the long run.
Kind of hedging your bet a little bit.
Hedge your bet. If does this have to, get bigger for me to consider it, or what if it stays flat? And then when you remove like the founder from the equation, there's always, what can go wrong? Were they doing something you weren't aware of? How does Google view this? Et cetera, et cetera. But a nice hedge too is like the multiples I mentioned. If you buy a smaller site and you're paying 4 times profit, and your site is valued at 6 times profit, and you take their profit and add it to your profit, you have a nice hedge there, in that you bought it for 4 times profit, and now it's worth 6 times profit just because you now own it.
Yeah.
So that's a nice protection as well. It's a longer term game, right? It doesn't mean more money the next
like
month.
Automatic appreciation, like instant appreciation. Yeah. That had never dawned on me. That makes perfect sense. Even I understood that, when you explained it. So
yeah. It's that's why you see that's one of the reasons you see a lot of aggregation in the web world now. Like a lot of the companies keep buying more and more sites. One, because they have access to capital and expertise and all that, but 2, because financially it's a really good decision generally.
Right. So last time we talked, I think you had either just exited or you were on the exit trail from I think maybe the mattress site. Or pretty close to that. So I mean, your lifestyle shifted virtually overnight.
Yeah.
Tell us how, I mean, for those of us that one day aspire to, to be sitting in that seat, what's it like going from, Gary V land of hustle, mania to, what am I can sleep till 10. I may
Right.
just go down to Starbucks and spend the afternoon. I don't have to even take my laptop if I don't want to. So
Yeah.
what was the transition like for you? And what were some of the lessons that you think you maybe learned that you had to learn over time to kind of put into place to make that transition well?
Yeah. I think mine was perhaps even more extreme than most. Because I was living in New York, Brooklyn, New York. Had this exciting life, company I was loving, working really, really hard. And like I said, we sold very shortly after COVID started. And so the plan, you have all these dreams, you're working so hard because like, oh, we were gonna travel the world literally, when I sold. And kind of put off some things to do that. And so COVID hits, and we immediately move out of Brooklyn to Nashville, Tennessee, to my in-laws' house, and sit there for about a year, right? Because you can't go anywhere. And
I'm
so
sitting on a load of
I'm
cash
not,
and I can't spend
I,
it.
yeah, I'm not in Paris. I'm not in Bali. I'm not in wherever. I'm in Brentwood, Tennessee, in my in-laws' house with nothing to do, right? Um,
You can only order so much crap off Amazon.
Right. Yeah. And so, and I was more about the experience. I didn't want
Yeah,
to buy,
exactly.
there was nothing I wanted for in terms of stuff I was going to buy. I literally bought, I was like, oh, I want to buy a nice something for myself to commemorate it. And I like bought a jacket and it was too small and I returned it. And like, that was it. Like I just forgot about it. So, um, it was very dramatic in that sense. And, uh, you'll hear a lot when you sell and you have that big kind of exit that in a way it kind of is difficult because you had a lot to do and you had a lot of purpose and you had a lot of expectation, and then it quickly goes away and suddenly nobody cares about you anymore. Nobody calls you. And Kevin, you called me, so
I'll
thank you.
still call you Kenny.
I appreciate it. You still called me. Appreciate it. Nobody else called. Um, and I had nothing to do, so I couldn't like go make. I was in a new city. I had no relationships. I couldn't. People are like, "Oh, let's go for. You can go hiking in COVID." As I had no one to hike with, right? And so it was a tough period. I think having a young kid and just being like your world changing so dramatically, and not in the way. And this was a lot of people suffered during this time. So like, and everyone had a tough time. So I had probably the best version of a tough time. You sell and everything's secure and great and wonderful. So not a complaint, but it was, not the period of time I was expecting. And it probably took me a year and a half, maybe even 2 years now to like really feel like settled and like I'm kind of ready for the next stage of whatever's to come.
That is, were there times that you woke up and you thought, man, I kind of miss the hustle. I miss going in the co-working space, the office, or wherever you were working at that time. And I mean, even miss working with people,
Yeah.
sitting in this bullpen environment and just, we're just hustling together and everybody's pulling in one direction to make something happen type thing. And like teaming, all those things that just overnight just disappeared.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think, you don't realize that you're, it feels like stress and maybe in the moment when it's happening, and then you look back and you're like, oh, that was fun. Like we were
Mhm.
just two guys writing a blog, and then it turned into 35 people, and then and it's like who knows where it could have gone from there if we kept going. But it's definitely, I'm getting a second chance at life in a different way, not at life, at career in this sense. And so making sure I appreciate it. I am enjoying it a lot more.
Mhm.
One, because you take the time to really enjoy it, and some of the initial stresses are gone. Let's acknowledge that too. Or like,
Yeah.
I'm not worried about paying the rent with this website or whatever. But also, I learned a lot about how I built the company and why I'm doing what I'm doing along the way, and along that reflection. So this round is a lot better because of that focus and those strategies I've implemented, and just like the people I have around me are some of the same people, but we've just kind of solidified our relationships and how we work together, and have grown in appreciation of each other over time as well.
So some of let's just play hypothetical for a second. So some of those people that were with the original site that you sold that were employees.
Mhm.
So, you know, everybody's watched movies on, you know, how owners exited companies, and
Mhm.
was this one where you literally sat down with with the group? Was it still kind of that family atmosphere? You sat down and said, "Hey guys, we've got an offer to buy this company, and this is what we think we may do.
Mhm.
This may have this effect on you," type thing, or is this one of those things where you just kind of walked in on a Friday and said, "By the way, I just sold the company,"
Yeah.
type thing. So I know you. It's like, how do you balance that as the leader? You've got to keep things kind of under wraps until they happen, but yet,
Mhm.
you don't want to just pound that on, just drop that on somebody, out of the
Yeah.
blue. But and was maybe part of that was negotiated into the deal, just said, "Hey, we're going to keep this running, and these people need to stay on," type thing, or we appreciate that. But
Yeah.
how do you, what do you say in hindsight? What are some lessons that the people that are looking at exiting, how would you advise them?
It's a really tough thing. You highlighted a lot of the challenges where, and we were of a size where 35, not a huge company, but it's not a couple people also.
Yeah.
So, and everyone reacts to news differently. That's what I really learned that again in that process. But I did not, other than like, my partners that were in the discussions of the deal with me, we didn't tell anyone that it was happening. And I reached out to a number of people that had sold, and they're like, you can't tell anybody,
Hmm.
just because one, the deal may not happen. I've had
Sure.
deals that don't happen. Then you bring folks along on this roller
Yeah.
coaster ride that you don't want to. Um, and results going to be the same whether they know or not. And
Hmm.
they didn't really sign up for that roller coaster ride,
Yeah.
um, as an employee generally, right? So we didn't tell anyone, and I think that was the right decision. I would always recommend that. Every case is unique, but um, the tough part too, I think two tough parts is one, that the companies that bought us, they kept about 3/4 of the employees.
Hmm.
That means they didn't keep about 1/4. So that was
Hmm.
tough delivering that news. Certainly the worst part of the deal, for me and for them, of course. And so um, you know, I don't know. I don't have a great answer for that. Like, it was tough, but I don't know how I would have done it differently to make it better. We
Yeah.
provide severance and things like that. Try to be thoughtful about it. But particularly, and this was again, out of the worst part, was right after COVID. So I'd worked with these people in person for some of them for years, and we did it all via Zoom when Zooming was like just new, right?
Mm.
And so
Yeah.
essentially deliver the news via Zoom. Everyone's sitting in their own respective wherever they are, and um, just like a very, this was May 2020, just a lot of uncertainty in the world in general,
Yeah.
right? So I think employees, even if it's good news, hey, we sold the company, hey, you're moving to this new company, they don't know who this new company is and
Right.
who their new boss is or how their day-to-day is going to change, and there's a lot of uncertainty in general when a business is acquired. And you just add in like COVID, where the whole world is uncertain in
On
every
edge
way.
for
And
sure. Yeah.
I think it was a tough process, and a very strange process, again, because of COVID. Some of those employees I haven't seen in person ever again, or since
Hmm.
then.
Yeah.
So it was a strange, and particularly with Zoom, again, like delivered the news and had one-on-one conversations with everybody, and then that was it. You
Yeah.
don't it's just you don't really speak to them again, and they move on to the new company. And
Right.
I've reconnected with a number of folks from that time, even just a quick text, like, how are you, and this and that. But I actually talked to two of my former employees just today. So um, you know, some of them have started their own ventures during that time, which is awesome.
Hmm.
That was one of them where I was trying to give her some advice on how to do it better. And so I always made myself available. That was a good part about having some time. I was like, hey, if I can be useful to you in any way, let me know. And some people took advantage of that. So yeah, it was a very tumultuous time. And my first time, I've bought and sold sites before, but never a company before. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was a different experience. I learned a tremendous amount about it during that time. Um, so, but some of those problems, there's no answer for it, unfortunately, to make it better. But um,
That
I,
I think it's just truth with empathy.
yeah.
And I know that you would have exhibited that, with the people you talk to. But um, so I remember when we talked the first time, I got the sense that you had almost arrived at a point where you could almost rinse and repeat.
Mhm.
You'd almost kind of cracked the code on doing this well, and you'd really reduced the failure. You really mitigated the chance of failure on this, to a
Yeah.
pretty low percentage. And so, are you even better now than you were, 2 or 3 years ago? Do you even have, because it sounds like to me that you talked about a flywheel earlier. It's
Mhm.
very much almost a flywheel. Just say, you know what, we can spin one of these up every 3 to 4 months and just hire new people and just teach them how to do it. Give them the booklet on how to do it, and they just sit there
Mhm.
like, jump on that hamster wheel and kind of crank this stuff out, and then boom, it just happens.
Yeah.
Almost endless scale.
Yeah, it's definitely possible, and we're starting to develop more and more systems. I think the people element is the toughest element to scale, because the controls on quality are very high. But in terms of
Mm,
strategy, yeah, again, like a multiple of where I was before, and a lot of that developing. We had our core expertise in, do we make it better? Do we make it tighter? Do we make it more predictable? We have, but we're developing other expertises now, where I've spent the last year just dialing in on email. Because it's like, hey, this blog in Barbend gets about 5 million visitors. Like, what if we really did something with those visitors and got them to come back? And like, we know a lot about these visitors, even just because of the article that they're on.
hmm
Um, so we always had an email list, and kind of like, everyone's got an email list, right? Do you like really do anything with it? And we weren't for quite a while. So we've since launched a couple of other emails, um, one being our main one, and like we really focused on it and grown it, but others like, uh, we have a bodybuilding only email, which for people outside, they're like, isn't that what your whole site is? They're like, no, bodybuilders like really love bodybuilding stuff
Yeah.
specifically. And CrossFitters really loves
hmm
CrossFitting stuff. And they don't want to hear about the bodybuilding stuff
hmm
like very often, maybe on a rare moon, right? And so that's been one of the big focuses that I've been on is can you grow that email list? And it's been incredibly powerful. It works well as a standalone business. But when you're pushing your own content back out, then you just see all these signals just keep really pounding on each other. Um, you're sending all these signals to Google, and they're like, oh, this article is great, we'll promote it more. And then you get more emails, and then you promote the articles, and it just like keeps building upon itself.
Yeah.
um, Social, I've never been great at social, but I've gotten better, I'd say, in the last couple of years. Facebook's becoming a decent source of traffic for us. I'm actually exploring TikTok now to see if we can pull it off. YouTube's always been good for us. We're trying to get better at doing that and creating scale. So I think we're at a point, where we would know what rinse and repeat. I think, strategy wise, absolutely. People wise, can we take these 15 people? Like, we need 15 more people that are executing really well. And is that doable? Of course it is, but it's a lot of work too, to get 15 people really in sync and like and enjoying their life and enjoying the content expertise and all that. So, um, ultimately, I think that, we will achieve that, but, um, it's easier than, I don't want to make it sound too easy, too casual, or it's like when you make an investment in in a site, yes, there's a 90 whatever percent chance it's going to be a success, but it's also because you gotta really execute well,
Right.
on that. And so can't just forget about it and let it run and disappear into the
Yeah.
night, I guess.
There's just no doubt it's work. It is certainly work, but I think that's kind of part, you built that into your strategy too. you've built that effort, you've built that quality, you've built that, expectation, and, who you would hire and what type of person, fills those roles. So, man, I could just sit here and ask you questions all day long, but I know you got a life to get back to. But just as we close up today, just is there any final, piece of advice you would give a founder that is, kind of thinking about, how to exit well, how to balance life, post, exit type thing, just anything, just a short, nugget or two you want to close us out with?
Yeah, I think the big thing is one, take the time to celebrate,
Mm.
and really, your work has paid off, and maybe it wasn't the exact text you wanted, or maybe, there's a million factors, but it's a life milestone, and to take that and really appreciate it for what it is, I think is important. And that was advice that I was given when I sold. And again, it was tougher because I was sitting in Brentwood, Tennessee, in my in-laws' house, but I tried to do a little bit of that. And then two, just it takes a while for a lot of people, and me 100% included, to get the business out of your system. Like, you're running like this and going so manic even for years. And I would say take some time and let it pass through before you like make any big moves. And I've heard people say this about investments and starting the next business and all of this. So if you have the luxury to take the time to really process like what's happened, and like, not to say that you'll come to any great revelation, but just like let your system kind of reset before you make the big jump and the big commitment and the next thing, whatever it is. And that was advice that some of the best advice I got, I think, too. And in some ways I listened, in some ways I didn't. But next time that'll definitely be the case, to just like let it all pass through and let yourself reset before you really move on to the next thing.
What a great way to end today. I mean, what a great piece of advice. And I mean, we can hear the advice, but it has to become part of who we are. We've certainly got to personify that in our own way. You had to kind of take that new identity on and figure out, what is it like to walk in Kenny Kline's shoes and be that person that, you're aspiring to be, post exit. And I think it's just true of any major life change, that would probably apply. But Kenny, man, I appreciate you taking the time today. It's always good to catch up with you. And I can personally attest that, when I've reached out to him, even outside of podcasts, I mean, he's always been there to respond. So I'm grateful for that, and really appreciate you walking that out and living out what you just said you would do. And but really just once again playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Kenny, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Another episode in the books. We hope you heard some great takeaways. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on iTunes and YouTube. As always, thanks for listening to Rising Tide.